Welcome to the England Rugby Pod. Thanks for downloading episode 72. It's another week off for the Six Nations, and we take another look at the Scotland against England game, and of course ahead to the France game next weekend. You're listening to the England Rugby Pod, the rugby podcast that believes England will win the World Cup in 2019. Hey guys, welcome once again to the England Rugby Pod. I'm joined as always, well, not as always, but as usually always by Dan. Hi mate.
Hello mate, how are you? And yeah, like you say, as usually always, we're gonna be missing you this weekend.
You are my first one. I'm leaving it in your capable hands.
Well, mate, I'm a little worried, to be honest. I'm not sure how this ship's going to sail without you at the helm, but I'm sure we'll make it work.
I'm sure you will struggle through. Obviously, we've got quite a lot to talk about today. I mean, we reacted to the England-Scotland game, as you'd expect, kind of soon after the game. Probably a lot of, maybe slightly heated kind of feelings about how things went. We've had the best part of a week, 5 days or so, just to... longer than that, sorry. Just to kind of let it all sink in. So that's probably quite a good place to start, with a slightly clearer head. We'll keep it brief, but what are your thoughts now that that's all kind of sunk in a bit?
So it's all sunk in. The more I think about it, the more I go over it. I'm like, yeah, it's a shame we lost, but I think, as I said to you the other day, sometimes you've got to put your hand up and say, we lost because Scotland were better. They outplayed us. And the first half, they were absolutely world class. We got beaten by a better team. So I've kind of, made my peace. In some ways, I'm happier with that. We lost because we lost to a brilliant Scotland team who played brilliant rugby.
Okay, I mean, I have to immediately just disagree. Not about Scotland being brilliant. They were, but I think if we write this off as it's simply a case of they were better than us, then I'm not sure how we can say that we plan to be the best team in the world. My reasoning behind that being that England need to be able to look at that performance and say, we did all of these things wrong, and that's why we're going to go away, we're going to work on these, and therefore we're going to come back better. I 100%
agree with that. I do agree, but there needs to, off the back of it, there's stuff we need to look at. But I just meant on the day there and then, we lost.
We did lose, but are you saying that England's performance was as good as we would have wanted from them?
No. England there's a few things England need to work on. I think what I'm saying is, yes, there's stuff England need to work on. There's stuff even the All Blacks need to work on. And maybe this was a wake-up call, but...
Credit to Scotland. Let's not, I'm not suggesting for a second that they didn't deserve to win. I'm not suggesting that they weren't good. Like, I'm not saying Scotland were average, but England were worse. Scotland were very good. England were very poor. Scotland deserved to win. Had England been playing, to their kind of potential, I think it would have been a very close game still. That, credit to Scotland. I think England would have probably done it, but they didn't. And I think from an England point of view, the most important factor in this is, look, you didn't perform to the best of your ability, and now it's a case of identifying where it went wrong and how to ensure that doesn't happen again.
Yeah, for sure. So what do you think? What do you think of the key areas from your perspective? What do you want to see?
So, to be honest, I think it's very difficult to look at the back line and pick holes in, and kind of point out things that they did wrong, because I think the key element in that game was a lack of quick ball. Was it due to what happened in the forwards at the breakdown? And we discussed it last week. It's been discussed in the media. It's not that England, and I put a tweet out, actually, got quite a few people agreeing with me, and it was more plagiarising what you'd said, which is that England, it's not that England don't have the ability at the breakdown, it's that their game plan didn't require it. Maro Itoje, we know from when he first came on the scene, and I think that for his debut for England, I think he got something like 7 or 8 turnovers himself then. So we know he can go in and do that if that's the job he's been told to do. It's slightly worrying that if I'm right, it's slightly worrying that England go into a game where they have a game plan that isn't working and they don't have the ability to sort of change tact during the game.
That's happened a couple of times over the last sort of 18 months or so, hasn't it? So I agree with that. That is a worry.
So that's one area that I definitely want and Eddie Jones comes out and talks about leadership, and we need strong leadership. Not that the leadership that exists isn't there, but he wants more of it. But leadership or not, these guys are professional rugby players at the very top of their game. They should have the ability to go, hey guys, this plan we've got of standing at the ruck and assuming that the ball is safe hasn't worked the last 3 times we've tried it. We should probably try something different. And they should be able to react to that during the game, and not just in the last 5 minutes.
Yeah, I know, I agree. There's a lot to look at, and that's one of the things that it's something Eddie Jones has said, something about the sort of leadership in the team he's been worried about. When you said look at the back line, it was hard. I slightly disagree. Now, it almost seems sort of unfashionable to have a go at Mike Brown these days. But I am going to have a bit of go at him. I think he got found out.
Mate, your side of order, he's amazing.
Yeah, I'm a little scared because although I think we, in our heart of hearts, know Eddie won't be listening. If he does, we've seen how crazy he goes about it. But he got found out for lack of pace. I'm not because he's a bad player, not because of anything. And I'm sure a few years back he would have been fine. But I thought there were a few times where he was just that yard slower than he has been, and that got found out. I guess
the thing is, I've never really looked at Mike Brown as being in the side for pace. He's there, I think, for experience, positioning, knowing where to be, particularly when it comes to the kicking game. And when you've got an Anthony Watson and a Johnny May outside you, the pace exists there. Jonathan Joseph in the centres. So part of me feels like that's not the end of the world. But I know what you're saying. Are we missing a trick if you've got a Jack Noel or an Elliot Daly kind of sitting in the wings, so to speak, rather than literally? Is it a mistake to kind of go with a Mike Brown who is getting beaten for pace? It's difficult.
The thing that worries me is because you look at the All Blacks back three, you look at the likes of Ione and things. If they see that game. And they see where we've been caught out, they will try and expose that. And I think they will be able to expose that. And so that's why I am worried about the Mike Brown thing. And actually, I think this does need a real look at, do we need a Watson at a fullback, a Noel at a fullback, someone like that who, yes, Mike Brown's position and things are great, but if you're going to be beaten for just raw gas, there's nothing you can do about that. So maybe you do need somebody who can make that half yard if you are caught slightly out of position or whatever.
Yeah,
I think Jones exposed Mike Brown for that a couple of times.
I guess the thing is, okay, so the Hugh Jones, obviously one of the main times that he exposed that in Mike Brown was the try, right? Where
the second try, that was weird. They didn't tackle him.
Between the two of them, it was almost like they ran into each other, and it prevented either one of them from making the tackle. It was a bit of an odd one. It was also a lucky. The first one was a lucky bounce. I mean, there was some luck. Let's not, in terms of the finishes. So Scotland played brilliant rugby, but the actual points that they scored, there was quite a lot of luck in those points. Bounce of the ball, and these things happen. I'm not suggesting that it was undeserved because of it, and you create your own luck, I guess. But in terms of, I guess the thing is, England has this rush defence, which under normal circumstances is really good and puts a huge amount of pressure on oppositions, makes it very difficult for them. But I guess when you do that, you risk opening gaps, and it's about backing them to do it in such a way that the gaps aren't created and teams can't come through. So your Mike Browns at the back, their job actually isn't so much to be a last line of defence and more to be in a strong position for counter-attacking and playing the kicking game, being in the right position and what have you.
The rush defence is interesting because, for example, and this has been said a lot, that rush defence, if Finn Russell's pass for that first try hadn't just been absolutely unbelievably perfect, there's a good chance we would have scored that. So
absolutely. I mean, but this is the Finn Russell Maverick kind of theory, isn't it, from Hugo Monnier? And he's backtracked from it, but I think he was absolutely right. The whole point of calling him a Maverick is that he can win a game, but he can also lose a game. And last Saturday, he won a game. next time, is he going to be so lucky? Is he going to throw that pass that gets intercepted that completely changes the game? Because I think if England had scored then, it would have made life... we might have seen a very different game, because I think England would have got a little bit of momentum. Scotland would have been put a little bit more on the back foot. Scotland had this amazing platform to work with, created by themselves, but they got this lead. Then they extended the lead, and then they extended the lead again, and suddenly they can play now because they've got a little bit of a buffer. So yeah. I think if it had been a closer game, the longer it goes along being close, England know how to play those games. Whether it may not be pretty, but they know how to play a close game and close out a win. Scotland, maybe it would have forced them to have a different plan of attack, and it would have changed the game quite considerably. So that pass really, really was the key kind of moment in that game.
It was absolutely brilliant, wasn't it? It was absolutely amazing pass, like inch perfect, running, ball in hand. I just watching that as a 10, I just in awe of that bit of skill. But it's interesting. So moving on more sort of from an England perspective. So I've always said, and actually I'm going to backtrack on what I've said previously, because everyone's like, oh, you learn more from losing. I've always said I think you learn more from winning, because you learn how to win, you learn sort of what you did right. And that doesn't mean you can't look at your faults. But actually, in this case, as Billy Vunipola said as well, I think we'll have learned a lot from that loss, more than we would have done if we'd snuck a win, if we'd undeservedly snuck a win. So I am sort of backtracking on my point there. So one of the key areas that you picked up, and I 100% agree with, is back row. Who's your back row for France?
Honestly, I'm not sure I would make any changes.
Would you keep Law? I thought we got found out having Laws in the back row. I must admit, and I'm not blaming Laws himself. I think we got found out not having a sort of terrier on the ground, not having an Underhill, not even having a Simmons. I thought we got found out without having that.
This is where this comes back to this question of, did they have a game plan and they just didn't. They didn't kind of adapt to the way the game was playing. They stuck with their game plan despite the fact it wasn't working. It was the wrong one in hindsight. These guys can do it, and Laws plays in the back row week in, week out. He can do that. I don't believe that it comes down to the wrong selections. I think it comes down to the wrong game plan. And I think Scotland. They knew what England were going to do, and they countered it, and England didn't have a response.
But if so moving forward again, France may be hard, because I don't know if France necessarily have the
even if France did what Scotland did to England, I would like to think that as a result of what happened in the Scotland game, the England players and the back row in particular have basically been drilled to say, look, this is the game plan we're going in with. If something like that happens again, this is the game plan we're going to switch to.
But do you think they're the best players for back row currently? Do you think they're the best players to play that game plan? Should we need to play against I know what you mean, against a team that was similar against Scotland? So whereas perhaps an Underhill who will,
I think Underhill's definitely in with a big shout of being called up ahead of Laws, particularly after what happened in Scotland and how much the game changed when he came on. But I also think, just from having read articles and seen interviews with Eddie Jones, that Eddie's the sort of guy that says, look, do you know what? We have a game plan. We're going to address what happened, but I'm not going to make radical changes just for the sake of it. Sam Underhill is going to be a key part of the team, but he's going to come on from the bench. I actually don't mind either way. If he backs the same side and says, do you know what, you've got to... I really think...
Go fix it.
I really think England are going to come out firing on all cylinders against France.
I hope so, mate. I hope so.
And I think there'll be a massive response. I hope there will be, but I think there will be too. So part of me thinks these are the guys that got it wrong. Give them a chance to sort it out. This is yes, it's Six Nations. Yes, it's vitally important. Yes, you want wins, but this is also still 2019 is the ultimate goal still. And I think if you suddenly make wholesale changes off the back of a loss that came about, I think from poor tactics, I think you leave people a little bit in limbo. So part of me would like to see the same guys given another shot to rectify the situation, and obviously if they can't, then you make changes. You've got your guys like Sam Underhill. I think you prepare to bring them on sooner if necessary.
Yeah.
You don't have to wait to the 60-minute mark. If things aren't working at half time, make the change at half time. If it's obvious before then, make the change before then. But I don't think that would happen. But like I say, I wouldn't mind.
Yeah, I think my sort of issue with this is, and I know this changes when Billy's back, but actually doesn't necessarily, is, for argument's sake, is say Billy was there instead of Nathan Hughes, but would Billy, Rob Short and Laws be the right back row, regardless of game plan, regardless of that?
Interestingly, I think with Billy back, you've got that little bit, even over Nathan Hughes, who, credit to him, he did look aggressive, but still not quite a Billy Vunipola. I think with Billy back, you've got that extra go forward from him. I think he brings in out of some of the others as well. Some of the other guys that we talk about as ball carriers. I think when he's on the pitch and doing it, I think we see more of it from them as well.
Actually, I agree with that. I do agree with that.
And I think in that situation, perhaps you don't need, someone like a Laws who's quite so. Not that he's he is a ball carrier. He's been told to do more of it, and he's doing more of it. But maybe at that point you want more of an Underhill or someone similar, or Simmons when he's fit.
Yeah. So my background, I must admit, I'm sort of slightly different, and I what you're saying, I can't argue with, because if it goes that way, I wouldn't be annoyed with it. But if it was me, I would go Nathan and Underhill and Rob Shaw to start, and I'd have Simmons on the bench.
Is Simmons not still injured?
No, he's back. He's fine. He was on the bench for extra this weekend and actually came on, had a bit of game time.
Okay. Yeah.
And then the second row, you've got.
What would you do with Laws then? Would you drop him?
Well, that's it. You've got between the Toje Cruz, not Cruz. I think Cruz is out. Between the Toje, Launchbury, and Laws in the second row, and two of those three.
Oh, you see, Cruz is gone, do you?
Cruz was released back. So well, actually, you'd have all three, wouldn't you? You'd have two starting, one on the bench.
Yeah. So you'd involve them all, but you just basically you're saying you'd keep Laws. Laws would be on the bench, but as a second row cover rather than as a back row cover.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, again, I don't think I'd have a problem with it. Every week, changing slight tack, every week we talk about, well, not every week, but we regularly talk about Launchbury and how he doesn't have a bad game. I feel like we jinxed him. He didn't have the best game against Scotland, which is a rarity for him.
Yeah, no, I agree, but I think he's got money in the bank. I still
100%. I keep him in there.
Starting.
Yeah, I keep him in there, and yeah, I think he'll put in. He'll be one of the guys that puts in a big performance against France. France are a lot more physical. I think that's a lot their style, and unless they come up with something different, I think we'd like that more. They're not as quick.
So I've heard a rumor, and I can't even remember where I heard this from, but I've heard a rumor that the Edinburgh Nine or whatever they're being called, I've heard a rumor that they're still not going to be invited back to the squad.
Really?
That I heard that, but
I don't really.
Thinking, have I imagined that now?
I don't really,
because I'm sure that would have been bigger news.
Yeah, I don't get it. You got Teddy Thomas, who's in my opinion one of the best wingers probably in the world right now. Just looking at the way he's playing, and from what the media has reported, and usually the media exaggerates rather than underplays things. These guys have all been cleared of any wrongdoing. So I don't really get what point the French RFU are trying to make.
Yeah, so they've been cleared of any legal wrongdoing, whether there was a breach of sort of their own internal protocol, whether there was a breach of sort of French rugby.
No going out after a game.
Well, I'm not sure about that, but whether there was something else, I'm not sure.
Yeah, I mean, you'd like to think there was, because it's a pretty weird reaction. If not,
yeah, it does seem overkill, doesn't it?
But I mean, I guess we'll see what comes. I think we can't really worry too much about what they're going to do. I think if anything, I mean, Bastereau against Farrell is going to be fairly. I mean, Farrell will.
Well, Bastereau's playing at 13, isn't he?
Oh, of course he is.
Yeah, so him against
JJ.
Joseph. So, or do you bring in Tio? Because Bastareaud had a great game.
Well, this is the thing, isn't it? It's how do you shut Bastareaud out? But I guess the key thing is you don't let him get any speed up. So that that
JJ's a pretty strong defender.
But that kind of defence that England has could work really well against the French, because if you're not giving someone like Bastareaud the space to get up ahead of steam, he's not a Watson. He's not going to turn on the pace in 8 yards or something. He needs a bit of a run up to get going.
8 yards, 8 miles, yeah.
So that could work in England's favour. I think the key thing, I think it's a real shame that England never really got any good quick ball, because it's the backs that have really. This is not to take anything away from the forwards, but it's the backs that have really kind of brought the English game to life a little bit in the last sort of couple of years, and what they've been doing. And you look at that Italy game where, it's Italy, but quick ball meant that they could do things. And when they were doing stuff, it looked pretty special. The first 20 minutes against Wales was the same. They looked world class. Then they let themselves down later on.
But that's it. I mean, say the backs. I half disagree. I think the backs have been allowed to do that because the forwards have given them that platform. I actually think the backs sometimes are caught out. I think the backs need to have a bit more sort of strike move about them. Against Scotland, they seem really stale. I was not impressed by them.
But this is my point. They didn't have the quick ball to do anything with.
No, but that sometimes happens. And if that doesn't happen, you still want, you'd still hope maybe they could look to try and produce something. I know that's incredibly hard to do, and it's very easy to say, but they were taking the ball flat. They were taking it motionless. I wanted to see more from everyone, but it worried me how little the backs had, because maybe the back row of another team are having the game of their life. Sometimes you're not always going to get that quick ball. So you might need the backs to pull off something just a bit more special, whereas they seemed out of ideas themselves.
I mean, I guess, it comes back to this concern that we both have about, are England too one-dimensional? And, it might be a good dimension when things are going their way, but, they don't seem to have a plan B at the moment. We need to see that, grinding out a win is great from a results point of view, but it's not really a plan B. So they do need to be able to adapt and react better than they have been.
Yeah.
Anyway, well, let's move on, because we'll know more once the team's announced on Thursday, and obviously we'll know a lot more when the game finishes on Saturday. So
and on Thursday we're going to do another pod, you and me, before you go off on your hollybobs. So we'll be able to chat about that a bit more in depth, knowing exactly who's playing and what we think it's going to look like then.
Right. So not to cast a cloud over Scotland's win at the weekend, or a week ago, the Eddie Jones abuse thing. What are your thoughts?
So I've got thoughts about this. I've seen this, and what I want to be careful about is not to put this on Scotland, because this is just. So the people who did it, if you're listening, I'm pretty sure you won't be, because you're probably too dumb to know how to do a podcast or to listen to a podcast. But if you're listening, you are absolute fucking arseholes. You're complete oxygen thieves. Now, lads, if you're listening and you know I'm right here, take yourself out of society. Go to Alaska or something, build a commune and just live away from human beings. And whatever you do, do not breed. Your genetics need to stop right now, okay? Other than that, mate, I don't really have a strong opinion either way.
Well, fair enough. Let's move on then.
Mate, it was whatever you say. It was, and I don't care if it's rugby, whether rugby people should be able to take banter. It was 4 blokes bullying a guy approaching his 60s. It is absolutely ridiculous, and they're fucking dickheads.
So Scotland, RFU or whatever their official group is, they put a tweet out sort of apologising on behalf of Scotland and Scottish fans and everything else, and saying it's totally unacceptable and doesn't reflect the values that Scottish rugby holds dear, and rightly so.
And it absolutely doesn't.
No,
Scottish rugby.
I don't think anybody really is looking at this incident and going, "Oh, this is typical of Scottish rugby fans or Scottish rugby. I think we all know, certainly those of us that are genuine rugby fans, know it had nothing to do with Scottish rugby.
Yeah.
I was a little disappointed. Some of the reactions from that, on that tweet from people who they would say this is disgusting. I'm not agreeing with this at all. But then they caveat it with, but if you're going to give it in the media, you got to be prepared to take it. And it kind of pissed me off because I thought,
yeah,
Eddie Jones, from what I know and from what I've read and seen, he might in the media he might go at teams, he might go at other coaches, but it's rugby, and he keeps it within the game. From what I can tell, when it comes to the fans, he's always been brilliant. He's always been smiley and happy, and he doesn't get funny like he sometimes does with the media. And I think he's clever with the media. I think even with the whole Mike Brown incident that everyone's saying, oh, he lost his shit. No one was talking about Mike Brown after that.
Yeah.
Never came up. So I think he's quite clever. I think he knows if I say something that gets a bit of a rise and suddenly all cameras are pointed at me, they're not pointed at elsewhere where perhaps there are problems. And it annoyed me because I think, like you just said, when you watch that video, if you forget for a minute that that's Eddie Jones, England's head coach, and you just look at that as a human being, it's an old man, not a very big old man either, who has been accosted. He looks uncomfortable from the word go, but they want a photo, and he steps in and he has a photo with them. And then they start kind of shoving him and slapping him on the head and shouting at him. And he kind of is almost chased into his car. And then they're opening the door and they're screaming in his face, and it turns more aggressive, and they're calling him a cunt and all this other, it's pretty sick. And I know people will listen to this and say, oh, you're overreacting. They just had a few beers. It was harmless and all this sort of stuff. But, it was like you said, it was 4 young lads verbally abusing an old man.
Mate, so the way I look at this is take out who it was. Who do I think is an absolute bellend? Rupert Murdoch. I think the guy's an absolute bellend. I think he's genuinely a modern-day Bond villain. But I would be disgusted if people did that to him. He's an old man. Ultimately, they're intimidating. They're bullying someone. Yeah. And let's take away the old man. It's a bit harsh on Eddie. I'm sure he's still quite active. But, even if it's a guy the same age as those guys, it's 4v1. Like it's absolutely disgusting. And I'm looking at this from a non-rugby perspective. Actually, I'm just looking at those absolute pussies who just went up, thought they were being funny, thought they were being cool, and just were being just complete fucking waste of space. It made me feel a bit sick actually. And regardless, I have a go at Warren Gatland. If England fans did that to Warren Gatland, I'll be disgusted at them. I should ashamed by them. There's no place for it at all.
Yeah,
and I think
I don't
to
think
undermine it is not fair, mate. There definitely would be some England fans who would. As a whole, there wouldn't. Like 99% of Scotland fans won't do that. 99% of England fans won't do it. But you always get the 1% of absolute bellends, don't you?
But you would have thought we'd have heard about this. It would have happened before. I don't know. Anyway, maybe it's just because it was caught on camera and people could see it for the first time and I'm not saying that has happened before. Sorry, if that's what you thought. I'm not saying that England fans have done that before. I think let's forget who's fans. I think human beings generally know where to draw the line.
Yeah, that's why these arseholes need to take themselves out of society.
It's one thing to kind of scream and shout at someone from afar, on a rugby pitch, or when they're in the media or whatever. But accosting someone on their own. Essentially in the privacy of their own kind of bubble. They're not doing media stuff at the time. I don't know. It was wrong. But you've been quite vocal on your opinions of this. We both have. It's probably worth moving on. We don't want to dwell on it. I'm sure Eddie's over it. He's made it quite clear he's not going to get the train again. He's going to stick to private transport.
Don't blame him.
So he'll be much more comfortable in future.
Good.
Squad. I've written down squad changes. We've talked about it briefly already.
Let's.
Couple of. I think the back three. You mentioned obviously question marks over Mike Brown. Elliot Daly's back, and Denny Solomona just had a weekend.
He's had 2 great weekends.
2 dreamy weekends. Do we
5 tries in 2 weeks.
Do we think we're going to see any changes?
Would
you like to see?
I think we'll see changes with Elliot Daly. Denny Solomon has definitely put himself on the radar. Would I like to see changes? I'm not upset if Mike Brown starts again. Mike Brown is a good player, but I do think there were questions answered. I think Elliot Daly comes in the squad. He's such a good player.
Who for?
Did he before?
No, who do you bring him in for?
I do bring him in for Mike Brown.
So you drop Mike Brown completely?
Yeah, I'm afraid so.
Watson at the back,
I think Jack
Daly
Noel,
on the bench, or?
Yeah, I still think so. I think Jack Noel's earned a starting place.
Okay.
Even if they stick with Mike Brown, I think Jack Noel's earned a starting place. I would personally go, I don't think this will happen, but I would personally go Watson at fullback, Jack Noel and Johnny May on the wings, and Elliot Daly on the bench.
Interesting. I kind of agree with you. It's hard to look past. It'll be very interesting to see what happens. Eddie Jones made a relatively early change, bringing Mike Brown off against Scotland, suggesting that he wasn't overly happy.
Yeah,
he's obviously been, he's fought Mike Brown's corner quite aggressively. And so to drop him from the team altogether, drop him from the squad altogether, would be quite a big, bold move, following on from everything that's happened. And I wonder how much pride will play. I mean, it sounds weird to say it, but I wonder how much pride will play a part when Eddie Jones is thinking about his team. Because if he now drops Mike Brown from the squad, he's kind of saying to all those people that have been telling him he's been making a mistake, basically he's going back on everything he said when he got passionately annoyed. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? So I could see him moving him onto the bench, although I don't see Mike Brown as an impact player, so I don't see the value of that. Yeah. So it'll be very interesting to see which way he goes. I'm not sure. No,
I agree. And I think Mike Brown will still be involved. And do you know what? He probably has got the money in the bank. Oh, God, I hate that saying. Why do I've turned into a right dish? But I think Mike Brown does have that. I can't think of another way to phrase it now, typically.
Well, look,
I think he'll still be involved.
My concern is that Elliot Daly is going to come in and he's going to come in on the bench for Jack Noel.
I hope not, because I think Jack Noel really does. I'd like to see Jack Noel start.
Well, I mean, if they're looking at the stats, Jack Noel against Scotland, despite only having 20 minutes, made the most carries for the most ground of all England players. I think it was 11 carries. I mean, it was only 11 carries for about 11 yards. So, I have also heard talk or question marks over whether Danny Care should be starting over Wigglesworth.
I think that's so. I've heard this as well, but I've heard it in the context of Danny Care offers so much from the bench.
Oh yeah, not as in Wigglesworth is a better player, but he's got the stronger kicking game. And is he more suited to a 60-minute game, and Danny Care more suited to an impact 20 minutes, or even if it's half an hour and 50?
I start with Danny Care.
I think you have to, don't you? I mean, he surely knows things. I think Danny Care suffered the same as the rest of the backs, in my opinion. The lack of quick ball. What he does requires quick ball. He's not a slow ball player. That's not what he does. That's not where his strengths lie. I think with quick ball he does great things, and I think when you don't have quick ball, there's only so much a scrum half can do. Yeah,
completely.
Fine. So we'll ignore that theory completely. He's sticking with Danny Care at 9, and I guess is Wigglesworth the right guy to be backing him up?
I think he definitely was. Yeah, I think so. I think he was, and I think he is now because of how much would need to be learned. Others weren't involved. If you could go back to the start of the Six Nations,
Dan Robson,
and you knew that, exactly, and you knew that Ben Youngs was going to be injured, so you had someone involved before the start, I think I'd have had Robson from the start. But because of the nature of how it happened, I think Wigglesworth is a great player. He's a brilliant player.
His experience just enables him to absorb the information a bit quicker and kind of come up to speed.
Yeah, and he's been involved more recently, so there'll be a lot of stuff he knows that perhaps a Robson won't. So I think he's a good player. And I think, I think he is the right one at the moment.
Fine. Okay. Well, look, before we call time on this one, I don't know. Firstly, actually, is there anything else that you wanted to cover that we've not covered?
There's something slightly different. Sort of looking more on the domestic side, but impact on sort of England rugby as a whole, I guess. Have Quins just done one of the best deals ever? Now they're attached with the All Blacks.
The All Blacks, yeah.
And as you, as a sort of Quins fan, I'm looking at that thinking, I mean, it's hard to know how that's going to materialise. But when I saw that, I was like, you guys are geniuses.
Well, the impression I got was that the main sort of benefit for the All Blacks is that essentially Quins becomes the team that their players go to when they want a year out. And, it's more controlled, so they know they're coming back, rather than just losing them to wherever's paying the most money.
Yeah, and I've heard, I mean, I could be wrong here, but I've heard that, like, All Blacks internationals, I've heard some of them are pretty good players.
Really?
Yeah, apparently so, mate. Apparently they can play a bit of footy.
Have to take your word for it, mate. Have to take your word for it. We'll find out. We'll find out in the autumn.
I was like, Quins, how did you manage that?
Yeah, that's pretty good. And also it'll be good because I think the plan is that to kind of create two-way traffic. So
yeah. And I think it's a coaching as well as playing thing, isn't it?
Yeah. But getting some of the Quins guys out there to kind of get the experience of playing in New Zealand, we know that it's beneficial. Whether love him or hate him, James Haskell got a lot of experience playing out in New Zealand. It's valuable. We know Martin Johnson did it. It was one of the things that made him the player he was. So it could be really useful. When you hear Martin
Johnson's name, does your heart just go a bit warm and fuzzy?
Sure.
No, mine either, mate. No,
okay.
Carry on.
But yeah, no, I think it's a great call from them. It'll be very interesting to see if this leads to other teams doing similar deals. I think if Sarries suddenly started looking to do it, I think the Kiwis might start kicking themselves that they jumped in with Harlequins so quickly.
There must be a reason it was Quins, right?
Probably some old boys club.
Well, I've heard Nick Evans might be a big thing because obviously Nick Evans,
coaching, isn't he?
Yeah, and he's back in. So when I say I think I heard it from the Egg Chasers podcast. I think JB or something. I think JB said that he'd heard that from someone else. So I'm just basically stealing what he said.
Oh, well, he probably made it up.
He may have, but I'm still stealing it from what he said.
Fair enough. Well, I guess we will watch this space, and something may come of that. I'm sure something will come of it. We'll obviously keep you guys posted with whatever that is. So yeah, just before we kind of wind things up, before I just got we had not another review, but just an update to a previous one. Is there anything else that we think is worth discussing in terms of looking at England off the back of that Scotland performance? Ultimately, I was going to say ultimately it's about England 2019. Goals of becoming the number one team in the world. You got the Kiwis in the autumn. How does this affect where things are going for England?
Why do I have the impression that you've got an agenda here?
No, I don't at all.
I think I think perhaps this is a post Six Nations sort of review chat thing. At the moment, possibly not. I mean, like we said, we're going to do another one on Thursday, but I think post Six Nations, let's really sort of sit down and maybe have a look at the broader future. For the moment, let's maybe focus more on the upcoming.
Right. I'll shut up then.
That'd be awesome. But
okay.
Like I would say,
wouldn't make the best podcast. We both just sit in silence for 40 minutes.
Well,
On that note, 9 points, Jim. A few weeks ago, you rated us, and you left us a review where you incorrectly said that Andy's voice was like a chain-smoking Joe Pasquale, when in fact you can hear it's silky smooth. Dan, on the other hand, Dan, say hello.
Hello.
Is the chain-smoking Joe Pasquale. However, although he hasn't changed that, he has rectified what he had previously given us a 3-star and turned it into a 5-star. So whether it was a mistake the first time round or you just like being mentioned, thank you very much for updating that. We appreciate it, of course. And guys, please, if you haven't already, get onto iTunes. We're on aCast as well. Rate us, review us, Spread the word, spread the love. Get in touch with us on Twitter at England Rugby Pod. We're on Facebook as well. There is a website, www.englandrugbypod.com. And yeah, if you can think of any other ways of getting in touch with us, just get in touch. Let us know what you think. Have your say. Join the conversation and all that. Continue listening. We'll be back on Thursday.
Yeah, and just a quick one to 9 Point Jim. Mate, I'm sorry if the voice is a bit annoying, but don't worry, you're not in solo company. My mum often tells me my voice annoys the crap out of her as well. So, you're in esteemed company there. But guys, thanks very much for listening. We'll be back on Thursday.
See you guys.